What would you do if you discovered a secret that could change your family forever? A secret so big it could shatter the bond you've worked so hard to build? Today, I'm sharing a story about boundaries, love, and the consequences of crossing lines that should never be crossed. This isn't an easy story to tell, but it's one I hope will make you think about family, about choices, and about the weight of the decisions we make. My name is Maitline Pugh. I'm 39 years old, and I've been a single mother for most of my life. My son, Zion, is 19. He's my everything, my pride, my joy, and the reason I've pushed through so many hard days. But this story isn't just about the love between a mother and her son. It's about how that love can sometimes blur the lines, how good intentions can lead to unintended consequences, and how one moment can change everything. Before we go any further, I need to warn you. This story deals with mature themes. It's about family relationships and the challenges of navigating life when things don't go as planned. If these topics make you uncomfortable, this might not be the story for you. But if you're willing to listen, I hope you'll walk away with something to think about. This isn't a story I ever thought I'd tell. It's raw, it's personal, and it's not always easy to hear, but it's real. Sometimes, the hardest stories are the ones that need to be told the most. So, let's start at the beginning. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment I realized that the life I thought I knew was about to change forever. Zion and I have always been close. From the moment he was born, it was just the two of us against the world. I remember holding him in my arms for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and thinking, this is it. This is my purpose. Being a single mother wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every late night, every sacrifice, every tear, it was all for him. When Zion was little, we were inseparable. He was my shadow, following me around the house, asking a million questions, and always wanting to help. I'd let him cook with me in the kitchen, even though it usually meant a bigger mess to clean up. He'd sit on the counter, giggling as I pretended to be a chef on a cooking show. Those moments were my favorite. As he grew older, our bond only deepened. When he started school, I was the one helping him with his homework, cheering him on at soccer games, and comforting him after his first heartbreak. I'll never forget the day he came home crying because a girl in his class said she didn't like him back. I held him close and told him, one day, someone will see how amazing you are. And until then, you've always got me. But life wasn't always easy. Being a single mother meant I had to juggle a lot. Work, bills, parenting, all on my own. There were nights I'd lie awake, wondering if I was doing enough, if I was enough. The loneliness was hard. I'd watch other couples holding hands or laughing together, and I'd feel that ache in my chest. I told myself it didn't matter, that Zion was all I needed, and most of the time, that was true. Zion, though, he was my rock. Even as a teenager, he had this way of knowing when I was struggling. He'd come into the kitchen, wrap his arms around me, and say, "You're doing great, Mom." Those words kept me going on the hardest days. But as Zion got older, things started to change. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was becoming a man, and with that came a new set of challenges. He started pulling away, spending more time in his room, and less time talking to me. I told myself it was normal. Teenagers need their space, right? But it hurt. I missed the days when he'd tell me everything, when I was the first person he turned to. There were moments, though, when I'd catch a glimpse of the boy he used to be, like the time he surprised me with breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. He burned the toast and spilled orange juice on the floor, but it was the sweetest gesture. Or the night we stayed up late watching old movies, laughing until our sides hurt. Those moments reminded me that, no matter how much he changed, our bond was still there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Zion seemed different, distant. He'd come home late without explaining where he'd been, or he'd snap at me over little things. I tried to give him space, but it was hard. I wanted to know what was going on in his head, but every time I asked, he'd shut me out. And then there was me. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was struggling too. The loneliness I'd pushed aside for so long was starting to creep back in. I'd find myself scrolling through social media, looking at pictures of happy families, and wondering why my life didn't look like that. I felt stuck, like I was just going through the motions, waiting for something to change. Looking back, I can see the signs, the little cracks in our relationship that I didn't notice at the time. The ways I would avoid eye contact when I asked him about his day. The way I'd linger in his doorway, hoping he'd open up to me. The way we both seemed to be drifting, not just from each other, but from ourselves. But in those moments, I didn't see it. All I saw was my son, my kind, funny, smart son, and the life we'd built together. I told myself we'd get through this phase, just like we'd gotten through everything else. What I didn't know was that we were standing on the edge of something much bigger, something that would test us in ways I never could have imagined. It started with a knock on his door, a moment I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because Tuesdays were always quiet. Zion had been in his room most of the day, which wasn't unusual. He'd been spending more and more time alone lately, and I'd been trying to give him space. But that night, something felt off. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when I realized I hadn't heard a peep from him in hours. No music, no video games, nothing. I told myself he was probably just studying or watching something on his laptop, but a part of me couldn't shake the worry. I decided to check on him. Just a quick peek, I thought, to make sure he was okay. I walked down the hallway, the floor creaking under my feet, and stopped outside his door. I raised my hand to knock, but then I hesitated. What if he was asleep? What if he was in the middle of something? Before I could decide, I heard a noise, a soft, muffled sound that made my stomach twist. I don't know what came over me, but I pushed the door open just a crack, and that's when I saw it. Zion was sitting on his bed, his back to the door, and he didn't hear me come in. My eyes landed on him, and for a split second, I froze. Then it hit me what I was seeing, what I was intruding on, and I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stepped back, my heart pounding, and closed the door as quietly as I could. I stood there in the hallway, my hand pressed to my chest, trying to catch my breath. My mind was racing. What had I just walked in on? What did it mean? And why couldn't I shake the image from my head? I went back to the kitchen, my hands trembling as I tried to finish cleaning up, but I couldn't focus. My thoughts were a jumbled mess. I felt embarrassed, confused, and guilty. Guilty for invading his privacy. Guilty for not knocking. Guilty for not knowing how to handle what I'd just seen. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment in my head, over and over, like a scene from a movie I couldn't pause. I told myself it was normal, he was a teenager after all, but it didn't feel normal. It felt complicated. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I knew I had to talk to him. I couldn't just pretend it hadn't happened. But how do you even start a conversation like that? Hey, Zion, about last night? No, that wouldn't work. I waited until after breakfast, when he was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I sat down next to him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Zion, I said, my voice softer than I intended. Can we talk? He looked up, his brow furrowed. About what? I took a deep breath. About last night. I didn't mean to walk in on you like that. I should have knocked, and I'm sorry. For a moment, he just stared at me, his face unreadable. Then he looked away, his cheeks turning red. It's fine, he muttered. But it wasn't fine. I could see it in his eyes. The embarrassment, the discomfort. And I could feel it in the air between us, this tension that hadn't been there before. Zion, I said gently, I know this is awkward, but I need to know if you're okay. You've been so distant lately, and I'm worried about you. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, staring at his hands, like he was trying to figure out what to say. Finally, he sighed. I don't know, Mom. I feel like I'm stuck, like I don't know who I'm supposed to be. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. I'd been so focused on my own struggles that I hadn't stopped to think about what he might be going through. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged. I don't know. Everyone expects so much from me. School, work, friends. It's like no matter what I do, it's never enough. And sometimes I just feel alone. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. Zion, you're not alone. You've got me always. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was really seeing him, not the teenager who'd been pulling away, but the boy who used to tell me everything. "I know," he said quietly, "but it's not the same." I didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to fix it, to make everything okay, but I didn't know how. So I just sat there, holding his hand, wishing I could take away all the pressure he was feeling. That conversation stayed with me for days. I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, about feeling stuck, about not knowing who he was. It made me realize how much he was struggling and how much I'd missed. But it also made me realize something else, something I hadn't wanted to admit. I was struggling too. And maybe, just maybe, we were both looking for something we couldn't find on our own. After that conversation, something shifted between Zion and me. It was subtle at first, like the first few drops of rain before a storm. We started spending more time together, just the two of us. It felt like old times, but different, deeper. We'd always shared little rituals, penal code, 1,900 movie nights, cooking together, long drives with the windows down. But now, those moments took on a new weight. We'd sit on the couch, a bowl of popcorn between us, and instead of laughing at the screen, we'd end up talking for hours about life, about dreams, about the things that kept us up at night. Zion opened up to me in ways he hadn't in years. He told me about the pressure he felt at school, the friends he drifted away from, the dreams he was too scared to chase. And I listened, really listened. It felt good to be needed again, to feel like I was still his safe place. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to notice something. The lines between us, the ones that had always been so clear, were starting to blur. It started with the little things, like the way he'd hug me a little longer than usual, or the way he'd look at me when I wasn't paying attention. At first, I told myself it was nothing. He was just growing up, becoming more affectionate. But then there were the conversations. We'd talk about everything, his fears, my regrets, the mistakes we both made. Sometimes, those conversations would veer into territory that felt uncomfortable. Like the time he asked me why I'd never dated after his dad left, or the night he told me he didn't think he'd ever find someone who understood him the way I did. I didn't know how to respond to things like that, so I'd laugh it off, change the subject, or give him some generic advice. But deep down, I could feel the tension building. It felt like a rubber band being stretched too far, just waiting to snap. And then there were the moments I couldn't explain, like the time we were cooking dinner together, and he reached over to wipe a smudge of sauce off my cheek. His hand lingered for a second too long, and I felt my breath catch. Or the night we were watching a movie, and he rested his head on my shoulder, his arm draped casually around me. I told myself it was innocent, that he was just being affectionate, but a part of me knew it was more than that, and that scared me. The truth is, I was lonely. I hadn't realized how much I'd been craving connection until Zion started filling that void. He was my son, yes, but he was also my friend, my confidant. In those moments, it was easy to forget the boundaries that should have been there. But the more we leaned on each other, the more complicated things became. I started relying on him in ways I shouldn't have. When I had a bad day at work, he was the one I turned to for comfort. When I felt lost or unsure, he was the one who made me feel grounded. Zion started to see me differently too. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the way he'd go out of his way to make me smile. It was like he was trying to take care of me, the way I'd always taken care of him. At first, it felt sweet, endearing even. But then it started to feel strange, like we were playing roles we weren't meant to play. One night, it all came to a head. We were sitting on the porch, watching the stars, when he turned to me and said, "Mom, do you ever feel like we're the only two people who really get each other?" I didn't know what to say. His words hung in the air, heavy and loaded, and I could feel the weight of them pressing down on me. "Zion," I said carefully, "I'll always be here for you. But there are some things, some lines, we can't cross." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he was going to argue. But then he just nodded, his expression unreadable. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew something had to change, that we couldn't keep going down this path, but I didn't know how to fix it, how to go back to the way things were before. The truth is, I didn't want to, and that scared me more than anything. It happened on a Friday night. I remember because Fridays were always our thing. We'd order takeout, watch a movie, and just be together. It was our way of unwinding after a long week, a little tradition we'd held on to for years. That night, we decided to watch an old romantic comedy, one of my favorites. We were sitting on the couch, the glow of the TV casting shadows across the room. Zion was next to me, his feet propped up on the coffee table, a bowl of popcorn balanced on his lap. At first, everything felt normal. We laughed at the cheesy lines, made fun of the over-the-top plot, and debated whether the main characters would actually end up together. But as the movie went on, I could feel the mood shifting. There was a scene where the couple shared a heartfelt moment, confessing their feelings for each other. I don't know why, but it hit me harder than I expected. Maybe it was the wine I'd had with dinner or the loneliness I'd been carrying around for so long, but something about that scene made me ache. I glanced at Zion, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was something in his expression, something I couldn't quite place. Then, before I could stop myself, I said it. Do you ever wonder if we'll ever find that someone who really gets us? The words were out before I could think about what they meant. Zion didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his eyes searching mine. Then he reached out and took my hand. "Mom," he said softly, "I think I already have." His words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. And for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to say or what to do. All I knew was that something had shifted between us, something I couldn't take back. In a moment of weakness, I leaned in. It wasn't a kiss, not really, just a brush of my lips against his forehead, a gesture that might have been innocent under different circumstances. But in that moment, it felt like crossing a line I hadn't even realized we were standing on. Zion pulled back, his eyes wide, and I could see the confusion, the shock, written all over his face. Then, without a word, he stood up and walked out of the room. I sat there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. What had I just done? What had we just done? The guilt hit me like a tidal wave. I felt sick, ashamed, like I had betrayed the one person who trusted me the most. I wanted to take it back, to undo the last few minutes, but it was too late. The damage was done. I spent the rest of the night pacing the house, my mind racing. I thought about going to Zion's room, about trying to explain, to apologize, but every time I reached for his door, I stopped myself. What could I possibly say? The next morning, I woke up to silence. Zion's door was closed, and when I knocked, there was no answer. I tried to tell myself he just needed space, that we'd talk when he was ready, but deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. Over the next few days, the distance between us grew. Zion avoided me, spending more time in his room or out with friends. When we did talk, it was strained, like we were both tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. I tried to give him space, to respect his boundaries, but it was hard. I missed him. I missed the way things used to be. But every time I thought about reaching out, I'd remember that night, and the guilt would baseline come rushing back. Then one evening, it all came to a head. I was in the kitchen, trying to focus on making dinner, when Zion walked in. He stood there for a moment, just watching me, and then he said, "Why are you avoiding me?" His words caught me off guard. I turned to face him, my hand still clutching a wooden spoon. "I'm not avoiding you," I said, though we both knew it wasn't true. "Yes, you are," he said, his voice rising. "Ever since that night, you've been acting like I don't even exist." I could hear the hurt in his voice, and it broke my heart. "Zion, I'm not trying to push you away. I just thought you needed space." "I don't need space," he snapped. "I need you to stop treating me like I'm some kind of stranger." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to explain, to tell him how sorry I was, how much I regretted what had happened. But before I could say anything, he turned and walked out of the room. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew I'd messed up, that I'd let things go too far, that I'd failed to protect the one relationship that mattered most. But the truth is, I didn't know how to fix it, how to go back to the way things were before. And that scared me more than anything. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe we couldn't go back. Maybe we'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And if that was true, then I didn't know what came next. The fallout from that night didn't just affect Zion and me. It sent shockwaves through our entire family, touching everyone in ways I hadn't anticipated. The first person to notice something was wrong was my sister, Naomi. Naomi has always been the one who sees what others don't. She's the kind of person who can walk into a room and immediately sense the tension. So, when she came over for dinner one evening, it didn't take long for her to pick up on the awkwardness between Zion and me. "What's going on with you two?" she asked, her eyes darting between us as we sat at the table, pushing food around our plates. I tried to brush it off. "Nothing. We're just tired." But Naomi wasn't buying it. She waited until Zion had retreated to his room before cornering me in the kitchen. "Maitline, talk to me. What's going on?" "You and Zion barely looked at each other all night." I wanted to tell her the truth, to unload everything that had been weighing on me, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain something I didn't even fully understand myself? "It's complicated," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Naomi sighed, leaning against the counter. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I can see it's tearing you apart. And Zion, he's not himself. You need to figure this out before it gets worse." Her words stayed with me long after she left. I knew she was right. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, but I didn't know where to start. The next person to weigh in was my best friend, Peyton. We'd been friends since college, and she knew me better than almost anyone. When I finally opened up to her, it all came pouring out. The guilt, the confusion, the fear that I'd ruined the most important relationship in my life. Peyton listened without judgment, her expression thoughtful. "Maitline," she said gently, "you're human. You made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you can't fix it." "How do I fix something like this?" I asked. "Start by forgiving yourself," she said. "And then maybe talk to someone, a therapist, someone who can help you work through this." Her suggestion stuck with me. I'd never been to therapy before, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I needed help, not just to repair my relationship with Zion, but to understand how I'd ended up in this situation in the first place. So I made an appointment. The first session was harder than I expected. Sitting in that small, quiet room, pouring my heart out to a stranger, felt like peeling back layers of myself I didn't even know were there. But as the weeks went on, I started to see things more clearly. My therapist helped me understand that my actions weren't just about Zion. They were about me, about the loneliness I'd been carrying around for years, the need for connection I'd been ignoring. She helped me see that I'd been looking to Zion to fill a void that wasn't his to fill. It was a painful realization, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was starting to understand myself. But understanding wasn't enough. I needed to take action. I needed to repair the damage I'd done, and that meant facing Zion. The thought terrified me. What if he didn't want to hear what I had to say? What if he couldn't forgive me? But I knew I had to try, for him, for us, for the chance to rebuild what we'd lost. Because the truth is, I couldn't let this be the end of our story. Not like this. The day I finally sat down with Zion to talk, I was terrified. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, and I felt like I was about to face the hardest conversation of my life. But I knew it was necessary for both of us. I found him in his room, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. He looked up when I walked in, his expression guarded. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, setting his phone aside, and I sat down next to him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, like a wall we'd both been too scared to climb. Finally, I took a deep breath and said, "Zion, I need to apologize for everything. For crossing lines, for not being the parent you needed me to be, for letting things get so complicated." He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite read. And then, quietly, he said, "I'm sorry too." Those 3 words broke me. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them until they were out in the open. "You don't have to apologize," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. This is on me. I'm the parent. I should have known better. But I'm not a kid anymore, he said, his voice firm. I knew what I was doing too, and I didn't stop it. We sat there for what felt like hours, talking through everything: the mistakes we'd made, the feelings we'd ignored, the boundaries we'd crossed. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the words caught in my throat, moments when I wanted to run away and pretend none of it had happened. But we kept going. By the end of the conversation, we both agreed on one thing. We needed to rebuild our relationship, not as it was before, but as something healthier, stronger, and more honest. It hasn't been easy. There are still moments of awkwardness, moments when the weight of what happened feels too heavy to carry. But we're trying, and that's what matters. Through all of this, I've learned so much about myself, about the importance of boundaries, not just with Zion, but with everyone in my life. I've learned about the need to be honest with myself about my own struggles and to seek help when I need it. And most importantly, I've learned about the power of forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. This journey has been one of the hardest in my life, but it's also been one of the most important. Because it's shown me that even when things feel broken beyond repair, there's always a way to heal. To anyone reading this, I want to say this: relationships are complicated. They're messy. They're hard. And they don't always go the way we want them to. But they're also worth fighting for. If you're struggling with boundaries, with communication, with understanding your own feelings, know that you're not alone. It's never too late to seek help, to make changes, to rebuild what's been broken. If this story has resonated with you, if it's made you think or feel something, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the challenges of family dynamics, the importance of boundaries, and the power of healing. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be sharing more thought-provoking content, including a playlist on family relationships and personal growth. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to continue this journey with you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, no matter how hard things get, there's always hope for a better tomorrow.